Hi, welcome to Trigonometries. Today we're going to look at an interesting spreadsheet function called VLOOKUP. Now what the VLOOKUP function is used for is to pull out a piece of information from a table that's already in your spreadsheet. So here we've started with a general little table that I just cooked up that has the name of several employees, maybe their ID numbers, their wage, and what job they have. And let's say that I want to be able to pick up some information about them. Now in cell G3, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a worker's name that I want to find some information about. And I'm going to reference that. But what we're going to do is we're going to say, what am I going to do with that name? So in H3, I'm going to put what I want to find out about that name. So let's say that from this field, I want to be able to search for a particular name, and I want to produce, say, the worker's ID number. So what I do is I'm going to use this formula called VLOOKUP. So you put the equal sign here to make it a formula, and then you type VLOOKUP. Now the syntax for this is first you have to write down what value you're looking for. Now the value we're going to look for is what we're going to put into our little search box, the G3. So I'm going to put G3. Whatever I put in that field is what it's going to look for. Now in order to figure out where it's going to look for it, I have to tell it where my table is. So the second entry in VLOOKUP is the table. And the way that you produce the table is you give the upper left-hand corner of the table where the information is that you're interested in, and the lower right-hand corner, and you put a colon in between them. So here, the upper left-hand corner of the table where there's actually data present is A2. So I'll put A2 and then a colon, and then I want to put the lower right-hand corner of where my data is present. And so that'll be D7. Notice that I did not include the title line of the table because I don't actually want it to search through those titles. I just want it to search through the actual data. So you want to make sure that what's here is the actual data part of the table that you want it to search through. Now what VLOOKUP always does is whatever table you've given it is going to look through the first column of that table for the value that you listed in the first slot. So here my table goes from column A to column D. It is going to look through column A for the value that I'm going to type into G3. So whatever I type in here, it's going to be a name, one of these names. It's going to search through that column and find that name. Once it does it, it knows which row I'm interested in. So this first value here is just to identify the row of data that you want. Then the third argument in this is which column in that row do you want it to pull out. So let's say I want it to grab the ID number of whichever employee I'm going to list in G3. So I would figure out which column the ID number is in, which is the second one of this table, and I'd put that number in here. I want it to pull the value in the second column of whatever row has the value of what I'm going to put in for G3. The fourth argument in VLOOKUP is kind of a strange one. It's basically trying to identify whether or not you want it to approximately find the value that it's searching for, or if you want it to find it exactly. Most of the time, you're always going to want to find it exactly. And so you can put this in here as a 0 or a false, which is what tells it to find it exactly. Typically, you can always end it with a 0 there. And so when I hit enter, it's not going to find a value. Now, the reason why it didn't find a value is because it's looking for what I put in G3, which I haven't put anything there yet. But now, for whatever name I put into G3, this formula here in H3 should produce the ID number of that employee. So for example, if I want to search for Owen's ID number, I can type in Owen and hit enter, and it found his ID number. Let's go through exactly what this VLOOKUP is doing. So the VLOOKUP says, first, identify what value you want to search for, which I said was in G3. So it sees the Owen. It says, okay, I'm going to look for Owen. Then the second argument tells it where to look. The table goes from A2 to D7. You're going to look through the first column for that value you found there, which in this case is Owen. So it goes through the first column until it finds Owen, which is right here, which tells it that the row that it's interested in is row 4. Then the third argument here tells it which column in that table I want it to grab. I want it to grab the second column in the table from A2 to D7 that is in Owen's row. And so that's why it grabs this thing here. The last one just says I want everything to be an exact match. When you look for Owen, make sure it's exact, which it did. And so then it displays what it found for the ID. Let's say that instead I wanted to find Owen's wage. How could I change this formula up here? Think about this for a minute. How would I change this formula to pick up his wage instead of his ID? Well, the wage is in the third column. And so I need to tell it that once it finds Owen's row, that I want it to pick up the third column. That's what the third argument here does. So I'll say I want to find the third column. And now it'll pick up Owen's wage. And of course, now you can actually change the name here. What if I want to find Biff's wage instead? and it just picks that off. If instead I wanted to find Biff's job, I could say I want the 4th column, and it would produce that. So you can use VLOOKUP basically to search through a table where you're going to run through the first column of that table looking for a particular searched item, and then you're going to tell it which column from that row you want to pick up the information from. And that's pretty much it for today on trigonometries. We'll see you next time.